one of the things I wanted to ask you about kind of growing up, one of the things you mentioned is it was I don't know if troubled youths is the correct term for the people who would go into those homes. I think that's a term that they would probably use now as troubled youths. That being said, normally when you have people who are troubled youths and you put them around other kids, there can sometimes be problems with that. Did you suffer from any of these problems where you get into maybe some stuff you probably shouldn't have or wouldn't have because of the environment?
Yes. And that's a great question, because not only was I definitely subject to, you know, maybe some behavior and or things or education that I would not have had otherwise. There was both, positives and negatives to that, right? So I'll come back to the positive and negatives. I think the other problem that, I found I didn't understand when I was younger, but I look back now and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me, is because I was kind of a piece of shit when I was younger. Imagine if both of your parents work in behavioral education, behavioral science, and they have a son that, it would lie, would manipulate, right, on like an extreme level. There was definitely some concern there. So like, yes, while I was exposed to a lot, at the same time, I also was exposed to a constant structured family that was about helping one another out, and was about, being okay with making mistakes, but learning from those mistakes and taking initiative and having good work ethic and understanding the consequences of everything. Like, yeah, the stubborn young me may have taken a long time to figure that out, but like, I look back now and I think about a lot of my fundamentals and values come from the teachings that they were doing in that home. And obviously I have a great relationship with my parents now, but certainly from age, 5 to 17, I was a tough one to deal with. The other thing too that's like really interesting to me is that like, I got subject to so much culture when I was younger, right? Music, dress. They were like, we had, Hung was from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Dennis was from Chicago, and Gary was from New York. So like, it was so amazing to have, right? Like lingo. And I mean, I remember the first time that one of the kids was like, played a tape that had rap on it. And I was like, what is this? This is amazing. So it had both positive and negative effects. I think the good thing is looking back, like I grew out of any of that bad behavior.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't retain it. I learned a lot from it. And so even though I gave my parents a really, really hard time for many years, I look back on it and I'm so thankful for those experiences. I think is really cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was the catalyst that caused you to grow out of it? Like what changed like at 17 where you're not doing all of these things anymore?
Dude, I mean, to be totally honest with you, it was the fear of going to jail. I don't know.
I've worked in a jail. That's fair. I don't like working in jails. I wouldn't want to go to one either.
I mean, people might be like, "Whoa, Wheat, what kind of shit were you into?" And like, I grew up in an era where the internet was just basically like, I got to see the internet born. I got to use it when it was educational only, and then I got to like be a few steps ahead using it when it opened up to the world. So outside of some really, dumb shit that I might do is like, me and buddies stole a bunch of like cigarettes from the gas station, or we, we kicked in, fence posts or dumb shit like that. I got into some pretty gnarly like cybersecurity trouble early on, and
can you tell that story? Because that sounds like a story.
Yeah, man, I can tell that story. I got a computer when I was 8. I was like, whoa, this goes back that far. It's important because I got a computer when I was 8. I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing tool I've ever used in my life.
Yeah.
I just have to know everything about it, right? I taught myself BASIC, and I would open up magazines and like type in their basic programs, and like even like got into like early debugging, and I even got into the cracking scene a little bit because I was like, how are they doing this? And like, how are they figuring out like how to get past copy protection? I even released a couple of cracks myself, but like that took me into like the BBS world. And the BBS world was amazing because suddenly it was like, there's other people out there like me, and they're also like, I can talk to them, I can connect to them. So that's always been something that has really resonated and hit home with me. So you can imagine that like I'm BBSing, I have like multiple lines, so I can be on multiple BBSs at once, or like run my own BBS and be on a BBS. And I got a shell account, which for, anyone is like, basically before anyone could access the internet, right? Even like before, when AOL and the CompuServe were kind of still their own networks, you went to a college, and a college then had access to like a Unix system and a shell account. And then those colleges then connected to one another. So through basically like my high school computer teachers who introduced us to the internet, when I got access to that shit, that was the early day of the rec news groups. And so, man, like it was holy shit, man. Like I had access to, alt.rec.drugs. I had access to alt.rec.hacking. Like I had access to all of this shit that like as a 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid was just like, this is the library I've always wanted.
It kind of reminds me of that, like the bomb book. There's a bomb book out there that people used to buy all the time.
The Anarchist Handbook. Anarchist Handbook.
It sounds like that so just for the internet.
Exactly. And you know what? Like that was the first thing you downloaded. And so the interesting part about this is that this was the Wild West, man. Like no one really had cybersecurity. So fast forward, one thing leads to another. I got access to UNL computers. I was, we were all using like a shared account. And through that, we just learned about how Unix worked, how it saved a password file, how it shadowed that password file, how most administrators had no idea that they needed to shadow the password file or hide what is shadowed. So then you could get in, and then you could, have an unshadowed password file that literally held the account credentials, username, password, access, etc. for the entire machine. Well, it wasn't too hard then to find a cracker that we would literally run for weeks at a time on our computer because they were that slow. And all it would do is apply a dictionary file that would be like, okay, Apple. And then it would take the word Apple and it would like encrypt it using the same encryption technique that was being used on this Unix system. And then it would go through and it would compare it to every single password. Well, we found a numerical sequence that was a password for like every default account they made. So suddenly I basically had full control, me and a few buddies, of like these entire machine, like every account we could want. So we would sell those to people. We'd be like, do you want access to the internet? Like $10 and we can give you your very own account. And then they might get shut down, but it gave them access to email. It gave them access to a Lynx browser. It gave them access to Archie. It gave them access to Gopher, right? Like we would show them how to use it. So anyway, fast forward another couple years and the high school systems got all their own systems, right? And then this is when the internet is starting to blow up. And this was ESU 13 was our district's educational service unit. And oh my God, dude, like when that opened up, we were so proficient in owning like these entire servers that we, within a day had the whole thing on lockdown. So the funniest thing happens, because this is like the moral of the story, is that like, you know, when you do things in a group and you're doing bad things in a group, you're always going to have someone who's going to do something not smart.
Yep.
And we had a guy who, just because he thought he was funny, there's a system command called wall that basically let you send something to every user who's logged into the system. And he took this giant text file and basically walled the text file to every user. So thousands of users then suddenly had to hit the space bar like 10,000 times to get through the entirety of this thing without the ability to break it. And they found out, like, someone's in our system. They brought in someone who was smarter than them. They were able to essentially find out who that kid was. And then, of course, he gave us all up. And so again, like, there was no, I'm finally answering the question about being scared to go to jail. My mom got a call one day, and I knew it was like one of those where I'm looking her in the eyes. I'm like, oh,
and you're like,
I'm like,
God,
this is it. This is it. So, man, they were accusing us of doing some crazy shit. Like, they were actually accusing us of, like, we think that they're, doing credit card fraud on here. And like, man, we were doing shit like creating a depository of Nirvana guitar tabs and shit. Like, we were creating our own NFT. We were not doing anything. So they were like, you need to come to this school and we're going to have a conversation. The principal, you and me. So my mom's like, tell me everything. I'm like, boom, here it is, Mom. This is everything. She's like, wow, how do you know how to do all this? I'm like, reading, Mom. It's awesome. So anyway, she's like, cool, we're going into and she was pissed, right? She was super pissed. He's like, we're going in. We walk into this thing, man. There was an FBI agent there. There was a local sheriff there. There was UNL campus security. There was the principal. There was the vice principal. There was the superintendent. So they basically just tried to intimidate my mom. And so my mom was like, why are all these people here? And I was like, man, your son's done all this stuff. And she's like, you said that we were going to have a meeting. And I've never been more proud of my mom. She's like, this is bullshit.
Hello, everyone. This has been a highlight clip from the Minds of Media. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube and join my Discord in order to be involved with the community. Thank you.